I'm really, really excited to chat with you. I'm really excited to share what you're doing. So please tell us who you are and what you're here to do.
How are you going? Thanks so much, Sheridan, for having a chat with me today. Very exciting, I guess, initiative that I'm looking to organise actually next Saturday on the 9th of December. And so I guess I'm currently a dermatologist in training and also doing a PhD here at the Alfred Hospital in Melbourne. And so, medical background, seen a lot of patients with skin diseases and hair diseases over a number of years. And I incidentally, funnily enough, accidentally started growing my hair almost 10 years ago, where it just started off being a little bit long and it kept growing and growing and growing. And after a while, I thought, you know what, it's grown this long, I may as well just not cut it. And it's grown and grown and grown into this bun, and I'll take it down because I guess what I'm planning on doing is actually shaving this all off. And this is the dramatic part. Look at that. I should get rid of the blurred background.
Yeah, it's so long it goes outside of it. Mm-hmm.
There we go.
So you said it's been 10 years of growing.
It will be 10 years at the end of next year. So it'll be about 9 years. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. And at what point there was a point where you were like, oh, well, I'll just keep it growing. At what point did you decide that you were going to donate it?
Yeah, so I think for the first year, it was more for a fashion-related meaning. And then it did get to a point where I thought, you know what, I've come this far. I feel like I should actually do something and to raise awareness for a good cause. And I thought, what other good cause would there be except other than to raise money for hair loss? It's something that people take for granted. People have very much so look at hair every single day, but don't really realize how much of an impact it can be to both have hair, lose hair in that process. And there are so many people, both I've seen as patients as well as family members and friends, who've suffered through diseases such as alopecia areata, and the social consequences that can have and the emotional consequences that can be quite profound. And I thought, you know what, this is a great opportunity to actually bring light to this. There are people in society where this is, you might see them every single day and not even realize. And what I wanted to do is to actually bring light to this and hopefully raise some funds to support the amazing work that the Alopecia Areata Foundation does.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. Thank you. We appreciate it. I have to ask, there are a couple of different ways that you can donate hair, right? So there are different kind of types of hair loss. So obviously Alopecia Areata Foundation, we support people who experience autoimmune hair loss. So any version of the Alopecia areata, whether that's totalis or universalis, including a couple of others. I'm really curious, what inspired you to help and support people with alopecia areata as opposed to, for example, chemotherapy-induced hair loss? Is it because of your background as a dermatologist, or is there something else?
Quite a number of reasons. And I think part of the initiative is to bring the issue of hair loss in general to the public. Alopecia areata in particular is the most common type of autoimmune hair loss, and that's something that is a lot more common than most people would expect. It obviously varies between demographic groups and ages, etc. But it's something there, many people may actually know someone with alopecia areata, but they just don't know it. So one of the reasons why I guess I wanted to bring light to this is because dermatology research and hair research is actually fairly limited in the world of science. And, we all often joke, in the medical field that, people don't die from skin conditions. Like, there are some skin conditions that can be deadly, but generally dermatological conditions, hair conditions, don't really have any impact on mortality. And as a result, governments, funding sources really don't put in as much time, effort, and resources into studying these things because the consequences are not, quote unquote, seen to be as severe. But the reality is that now, particularly in the last 10 or 20 years, research has taken us to the point where we can understand many diseases much better. And we can actually identify that sometimes life is not just about being alive or dead. Life is about having as much quality, both physically, socially, emotionally, psychologically as possible. And in order to do that, we'd really like to bring light to, as well as provide research support to patients, researchers, and the entire kind of scientific community around conditions which have been slightly neglected over the decades gone by, and alopecia areata is one of those.
Yeah, 100%. agree. 100% agree. We appreciate, like, it's really good to have people doing that and recognizing the emotional toll, the social challenges that people like myself have or have had in the past.
Mm.
Cool. So I have two questions. Actually, I have three questions. Why have you chosen to do a fundraiser? And tell us about the fundraiser.
Yeah, so basically this well, I guess I'll tell you the story of where it all began. So effectively my concept was that you know, my hair has become a big part of my identity. And over the time that I've grown my hair, I realized how important hair is to people's identity, because it's part of how you look, it's part of how you present, and it's part of what people identify you for and as. And for me, you know, I had my hair tied up in this bun. That became, you know, my identifying feature. You know, nurses around the hospital would say, "Oh, that doctor with the man bun," or just pat themselves on the head to indicate that, you know, it was me who was going to be coming to see the patient. So I realized that, you know, this is something that I'd really want to have some kind of very big change in what, you know, I look like, in order to really indicate that this is, you know, a big issue that needs to be addressed or looked upon in society. So I thought, okay, rather than just kind of, you know, cutting my hair, donating the hair itself to, you know, make a wig or doing something with the hair itself, I thought, you know what, this is a really great opportunity that I can share with my family and friends, as well as with the wider community, that, you know, this is a cause that's really worth supporting. So as a result of that, I've organized as part of the Little Korea Christmas Festival in Melbourne CBD on the 9th of December. There's a public event that's going on. Basically, there'll be a whole lot of food and, you know, festivities towards the Christmas period, all happening in Healeys Lane in Melbourne CBD this Saturday. And we're basically going to set up a little stall there. And at about 1 p.m., I'll go up on stage and have my hair shaved off in a public space where people can contribute and kind of find out more about hair loss conditions, the Alopecia Areata Foundation, and any other causes that we're supporting, and really make this a big community thing. And, you know, in the long term, I'd really hope to make this a regular event, and I'd love to continue working with the Alopecia Areata Foundation to be able to facilitate things like this, because being able to, you know, bring this to a more public space really gives more opportunity for the public and other people to recognize its significance.
Yeah. And I think it's really helpful for, like, as you said, it's a really big part of our identity, our hair. And in my case, being bald becomes a really big part of our identity. And so it's really helpful to bring community in and see that there's support in so many different ways, because on a really, like, primal level, it's like, hey, even when you change, even when your hair changes, we still think you're cool, we like you. And that's
Exactly.
really, really nice. Yeah. Okay, if there's somebody who is looking and watching this video and is possibly considering doing a fundraiser and donating their hair, what would you say to them?
So I think, you know, hair grows about 1 millimeter a day, up to, like, you know, 1 inch per month. You know, we all very frequently do cut our hair at some stage. If you do have hair, both kind of, if you have relatively long hair, at least 20 to 30 centimeters that you're willing to cut off in one go, donating that to be able to create things like wigs and support patients with alopecia areata is extremely important. But also, if you're planning on cutting your hair, or major hair do, or major change in your hair, we'd love to also have more participants in our hair loss initiative this Saturday. Whether that be this year or next year or at any time in the future, if you're thinking about shaving your head to raise money for alopecia, that's something that we'd love to connect with. And I'm sure we'll be able to throw in a link somewhere where people can kind of sign up and participate. And we'd love to work with you to be able to find ways that we can help to bring light to this, you know, important area of health.
Yeah, that's really awesome. And just to clarify, when you're supporting AAAF, where it goes, we have three kind of pillars to where all of this work goes. And number one is support, so that community support, awareness, bringing awareness to the condition, and research. And support also has a pillar of, when you donate your hair, it goes to our Grant a Wig program, which helps fund wigs for children. And support and awareness and research, and it also goes to all of the initiatives that we have that is like trying to work with people like yourself to get more research and get some really supportive I think awareness and research and treatment available. with much more ease and affordability. So there's that. Okay, so what would you say to somebody who has been diagnosed with alopecia areata and is watching this and is kind of maybe in that stage of their experience where there are moments where it's a little bit difficult, they don't know if they're going to get their hair back, they don't know how they feel about it, they're feeling that change in identity, as you said?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is the great news is that medical science is advancing at such rapid rates that we, as we all do, we always will hope that there is a cure. And that, you know, for anyone who does want to seek the opportunity to regrow their hair and regain the hair that has been lost, we hope that that will be something that will be able to be facilitated for anyone. And we can only do that through, you know, investing into research and supporting researchers and clinicians in being able to advance the science in these areas. But at the same time, in saying that, your hair is not everything. How you look is not everything. And every single individual is worth much more than the sum of their parts. And it really does not matter who you are, where you are, what you look like. Your value is much more than what you might see. And I know it can be an extremely distressing process. I've seen, you know, hundreds of patients go through this process where, you know, you might get a little bit of regrowth, you might lose a bit more hair, and it can be an extremely emotionally turbulent period. And, you know, one of the most frustrating things about hair is the hair itself is in many ways a consequence or is in many ways something that takes time to actually see, where the hair growth initially happens beneath the skin that you can't even see. So it can even take time for effective treatments to be able to be visible and noticeable, and something that may even, you know, you're heading in the right direction. So because of that, it might be a hard period. We hope to give hope to everyone who is going through alopecia areata or any skin condition or hair condition that results in hair loss. But at the same time, you know, I believe that everyone's value is much more than what their appearance is, and that there is always hope, and there's always a community around you to support you in every way needed. And the Alopecia Areata Foundation is a fantastic place to get that additional support if needed.
You know what, can I just say, it's really interesting because obviously my experience, I mean, I lost my hair when I was 7 years old. And so my experience going to a doctor or a dermatologist was when I was, you know, 20 something, how old am I? 20 something years ago. And yeah, 20 years ago. And so it is really interesting and nice, because I think that a lot of the time when you go, in my experience and the experience that I've heard of, a lot of the time when you go and you speak to somebody who is in the medical field, it's very cold and it's very oriented towards, we're going to get your hair back, we're going to get your hair back, we're going to get your hair back. And I think that's really, really helpful. But it's super refreshing to hear you speak and be like, we're going to get your hair back, and also if it doesn't happen, that's okay.
Yeah, and actually, I one of the things that I was told by one of, I can't remember which dermatologist, but there was a dermatologist that once told me that actually the most important thing to understand when looking after a patient, or even, you know, talking to a friend or family member or anyone, that person's goals. Because one person's goal in terms of their skin or their hair or their health might be completely different to someone else. And the classic example in dermatology is there might be one patient who has a tiny pimple, like a single pimple or a single freckle, that is causing them immense amounts of stress and emotional turmoil because it's bothering them so much. Well, there might be someone else who, you know, may have, like, for example, I have vitiligo, so I've you know, lost the hair color around my eyebrow and eyelash in certain spots. That can significantly bother other people, while other people, half their body has turned, you know, white from the skin condition, and it doesn't bother them at all. And that applies similarly to the, you know, older patients who care a lot less about their appearance compared to younger patients and children, where it can be a lot more distressing. So yeah, I think knowing goals is actually really important, which means that, you know, you need to ask yourself what your goal is with your treatment, and making sure that the clinicians and medical professionals that are supporting anyone through their health has their goals aligned with yours.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, hearing it, that as someone, as a patient, can take on to make sure that they're going into all of their consultations and saying to their doctor, hi, this is what I'm experiencing and this is my goal with it. Because I think
Correct.
sometimes it just brings kind of more of the power back of like, I'm going to go into the consultation, I'm going to work collaborative with this person to get what I want out of it, instead of going and saying, I'm having this thing happening to me and I'm going to assume that they know exactly what I need, how I need it, when I need it.
Exactly, exactly. And I think that's, the ability to direct the conversation in such a way to get to a point where you are feeling happy, healthy, and that you've reached the place where you want to get to is so important. And we were trying to veer away from this patriarchal didactic approach to medicine, where there is only one treatment, there's only one goal, there's only one outcome. In some
Yeah.
conditions, course, there are certain scenarios where, if it's a very critically life-threatening condition, for example, then obviously there's only one outcome, which, should be not to, suffer from very dangerous consequences from that particular condition. But when it
Right.
comes to the skin, there is a big range, and that range needs to be emphasized at every opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. Yeah. I
Yeah.
don't really know. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess talking about where alopecia areata or alopecia can become a bit more highlighted is, I guess, when it happens suddenly to people who don't expect it. And I think sometimes alopecia areata tends, I guess, in your experience, have you found that it's something that people may initially especially hide and try to minimize as much as possible in terms of their appearance, and do as many things as possible to minimize its effects? Is that your
Yeah,
experience?
because I mean, I have a background as a trauma therapist, so I see
Mm.
things kind of in that lens. And it's, I think what you said around identity really kind of hits everything there, because we are aware. Number one, I think it can be scary if you start losing your hair at home. I think it's really intelligent to kind of have this question of like, is there something more wrong? And is
Mm.
this, I think it's really smart to be like, okay, but am I actually okay? And most
Mm.
people will find that you are okay, and that you
Mm.
go to the doctor and the doctor's like, well, yeah, other than that, you're totally healthy. Um, so that there is kind of that initial shock, which I think can be really scary and definitely emphasized when everything happens really, really quickly, right?
Mm.
Um, and so then what happens is you have to go through a grieving process. And
Mm.
one of the processes of grieving is kind of bargaining. And I
Mm.
think personally, I think a lot of the people use the treatment process in that bargaining area. And you can stay there for a really long time. And no matter, even if your treatment, like quote unquote, works, as in you have a significant amount of regrowth, you are still
Mm.
a different person, and you still need to grieve
Mm.
the identity and the appearance that you had prior to
Mm.
experiencing, because now
Mm.
you have a disease that can like happen again. Your
Mm.
regrowth may look different. You have experience, you're a whole different person, you have a whole different relationship with your body, because your body has essentially gone and done something that you guys kind of had an agreement that it wouldn't do. It's like a betrayal, you know. And so I think that
Yeah.
it can, like, most people hide it, partially I think because some people can feel embarrassed or
Mm.
ashamed, but I think a lot of it as well is that it's just that it's very difficult to go out and present yourself to the whole entire world when you don't
Mm.
even recognize yourself inside, and it's not something that you
Yeah.
can control. So
Yeah.
people hide it, and I don't necessarily, and I think part of it is like shame, embarrassment, feeling sick, worried about what people think, and also just because it's like, I don't even know what this is. How am I going to go and speak to people about it at the shops?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I'm doing some other studies in vitiligo and research in that space, which is what my PhD is on. But in dermatology, we're increasingly understanding that, quite interestingly, the significance of the psychological impact of many skin diseases is much more social, because many people may not necessarily feel anxious or depressed when they're at home, or when they're with family, or with people who they're familiar with or who know what's going on. But the moment you're in a new environment or in a foreign place, and there is this possibility where people will start, looking or questioning or being a bit confused, or looking slightly differently at patients, that can be where the most significant kind of anxiety or psychological impact can come from. So what we often see, which is something that we really need to be able to address the stigma towards, is this idea where when somebody develops a skin condition or hair condition such as alopecia, that the consequence shouldn't be actually a change in behavior, because that change in behavior, that avoidance behavior of usual activities, can really set people back in their life in many other ways. People quit their jobs, people don't go out and meet new people stop spending time with their friends. There's so many stories of people who didn't go on dates because they felt embarrassed. People who literally left their entire lives and moved somewhere else in order to really kind of restart their life. And those types of things are something that we as a community of, I guess, community members, patients and family and friends and everyone in this kind of space really needs to work towards. Like, it's okay, we're all working towards a better future, but no matter how far we get, we're all in this together.
And that's I think that's highlighted mostly in events like yours, where people can actually come together, and it can be something that we talk about, we share about, we work towards together, and that people can kind of show up in any stage that they're in, and for that to be like warmly welcomed and celebrated. It's interesting what you say about a success rate being that there's not a change in behavior. I had never thought about that, because I always think that we think about success as having regrowth. But that makes a lot of sense, that a success would be that you wouldn't really modify how you relate with people in the world.
Yeah, or that either your community or the places that you go are equally welcoming or equally understanding of what's going on. As well as an individual feeling confident with treatment outcomes, feeling confident with your appearance, that from both sides, there is this happy harmony where the behavior really doesn't have to change. And I think that type of impact in individuals' lives is probably one of the best markers of success.
I love that, because it involves the individual, it involves their family, it involves the medical professionals, and it involves the entire community. It's not just like, you're experiencing something, we hope you can figure it out. It's, hey, you're experiencing something, how are we going to figure this out? That's really cool.
Yeah, it is. And I think, one of the things that is very interesting about skin disease is because it's so visual, it really affects that social aspect so much more than other specialties. Like, as an example, like medical conditions in other fields. So, for example, if someone developed liver disease or developed, a heart condition, because no one can see that, people don't change the way they interact with their community so much. Like, maybe they might not do certain activities because they can't do it because of medication, because of, just doesn't sit well with their overall health anymore. But because the skin is so visible, it really makes a big impact on how people, just really engage in society. And we're a far more connected and unconnected society these days anymore. And, there's so much emphasis on how people have to get out into the real world and talk to people and meet people and, really have real human connection. And the problem is that some skin conditions and how it's perceived by other people can really add even more barriers to that process. So I think those barriers need to be something we can address. And hopefully with our event coming up this Saturday, we'll be able to take some positive steps in that direction.
Yeah, I agree. Do you think that the event is going to help educate other people who have no idea what this is?
I definitely think so. And, even though I work in kind of the skin space, I would say outside of specifically in, like, say, the medical profession, outside of people who actually specifically work in dermatology, very few people even in other medical disciplines or in other healthcare disciplines have in-depth awareness of conditions such as alopecia areata and other types of hair loss causing conditions. And it's not really taught much in medical school. And if doctors don't know about it, then how can we expect the public to know about it? It's not really talked about in, to any
Totally.
much of an compared to,
Yeah.
say, smoke, lung cancer, skin cancer, things that are kind of thrown out at us all the time. So yeah, would love to educate members of the public, anyone who encounters, this video, the work that we do, the work that Alopecia Areata Foundation does, and hopefully even learn just by interacting with people. The more that we talk, the more that we meet, the more stories we hear, the more we realize, how not different we really are at the end of the day, and that everyone really is part of one big happy family.
Yeah. And that will help mitigate that kind of maybe shock or questions that people that, when you're walking down the street, you don't have any hair. I don't know if you've felt that, but you can feel that people they ask you questions. they're curious. And so I think educating kind of will help mitigate that other people don't know, and that when other people have more education, it's just a lot less responsibility on the individual to have to educate everyone that they're walking past. And that's what Australia Alopecia Areata Foundation is trying to do. So thank you, Chris, for helping us.
No problem at all. And I'll finish off with one quick funny story, actually.
Yeah.
I had a patient probably 4 or 5 years ago who, she was probably about 35, I would say. And she had 2 experiences in her life, which she said were so similar. The first was when she was not actually pregnant, but somebody asked her if she was pregnant. And that's a classic story that, it's like so offensive and, it's absolutely terrible that someone could do that. And, she was taken quite aback at that. And obviously that's something that has happened to many people before, which is terrible. But she distinctly remembered that experience in her life, wrongly being mistaken as being pregnant. She then later did actually become pregnant. And after her pregnancy, developed alopecia areata.
Mm.
And then she ended up, losing pretty much all of her hair. She eventually, shaved all of her hair off and decided to just have, no hair on a daily basis. And then people started mistaking her as being on chemotherapy.
Yeah.
As having cancer and being on chemotherapy and losing her hair because of treatment. And it was actually quite sobering that the feeling is actually very much the same. It's just being wrongly attributed to something which is just assumed to be normal. A young-ish person who, has lost their hair must be due to chemo. And the reality is there's so many more things that can cause that to happen in anyone of any age. So I think it's great that we can bring light to the fact that this is not actually, there's not just one cause for hair loss. That's probably the famous cause, chemotherapy. It's in all the movies, everyone knows about it. But I think being able to share the fact that hair loss can be acquired, can be inherited, people can develop it at a very young age through no fault of their own, with no clear explanation as to why. And then we can really start having these, important conversations and having less assumptions.